Good afternoon, everyone. Today is March 28th. We are here for Public Utilities Subcommittee meeting. We have two bills, House Bill 793 and House Bill 1035. Bob, when ready, I'll let you, what one do you want to take first? 1035?
Actually, I think I just sent out the reprint of 793. Is that correct?
You did. Everyone should have it in their official inbox. I know some other people aren't using that, but if you could use your official email, we would appreciate it.
Okay.
So we're going to take 793 first, Bob? Offshore
Yes, sir.
wind?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right.
This is the offshore wind bill, but we also have the Senate version. The bill is based on what the Senate had done, but there are some additional changes that were made. So let's go through, or some changes that you all asked for, I should say. So amendment number 1, as usual, is technical. There are amendments that add in the current definition of qualified offshore wind project, and then add some language about something which is located more than 10 miles off the coast, interconnects through to PJM either by a point on Delmarva or through an offshore wind transmission project under a later portion of the bill. The language we add to the findings of the General Assembly, a statement that it's in the public interest of the state to maximize opportunities for obtaining and using federal funds for offshore wind and related transmission projects through the inclusion of specified labor standards and goals, domestic content, requirements, and other provisions to align state law with the provisions of the federal IRA and the IIJA. Okay, we have some language concerning the projects that are subject to a community benefit agreement, and we have some slight technical changes saying a proposal that is selected by the commission rather than filed and approved. So that's just because the commission is selecting the projects. In the existing language on CBAs, which actually you'll recall came in under the Clean Energy Jobs Act, this adds a CBA also to apply to an offshore wind transmission facility, and where current language requires that the CBA promote and increase opportunities for local businesses and small minority, women-owned and veteran-owned businesses in clean energy industry. We're also adding, including the use of a preference given to businesses that are certified under the federal Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. That's something that USDOT administers. It's similar to MBE, but it is not race-based. On the state level, it is administered through the Maryland Department of Transportation. Language that we're adding specifically to align the CBA with federal law will have the project guarantee, or the CBA guaranteeing the construction work performed in connection with a project will be subject to an agreement with one or more labor organizations that establishes terms and conditions of employment at the construction site. The rest of the bill that's on actually page 8 of the bill, is as drafted to the bill. At the bottom of page 9, the amendments also require that the CBA guarantee against strikes, lockouts, and similar disruptions, ensure that work on the project fully conforms to relevant state and federal laws, etc., creates binding procedures for resolving labor disputes. Essentially, it's a peace agreement. It set forth other mechanisms for making sure everybody stays on the job and is happy, or at least relatively happy, both in the solicitation and the contract document as well. On page 10, they changed the reference to the Senate reporting to the Senate Finance Committee to be on E3, which we need because the Senate has moved things around. Then we get to page 12, which is where we have a lot of changes. We're adding language here for the developer of either a round 1 or round 2 offshore project, ability to apply for a full or partial exemption from the requirements in subsection C8, 2 little I, which is the 80-20 split, for any IRA grants, rebates or tax credits or loan guarantees, if at least 15% of the total hours are performed by qualified apprentices. Developer seeking the exemption has to fulfill their obligations under the approved OREC order, and the commission, the PSC, has to establish a process to apply for the exemption, and then open up their books basically to make sure that they actually need the waiver. And if the commission does approve a partial exemption, and we do have specific language authorizing the commission to approve a partial rather than a complete exemption, anything that they don't need to make the project up and going will still be returned to the ratepayers. Following that, the commission must consult with other states that are served by PJM to evaluate regional transmission cooperation that could help achieve our offshore and renewable energy goals with greater efficiency. This is basically modeled, my understanding is, on legislation that went through and was used in New Jersey, where their Board of Public Utilities negotiated with and cooperated with PJM to try to get their offshore wind projects off the ground. We will continue further down, and actually getting onto page 13. The commission has to include specs in the solicitation for proposals or work with PJM to do so, in addition to the current language about allowing future transmission lines to connect in a meshed manner and landing points, but also to address siting environmental socioeconomic information required to be considered by the commission under 7207, which is the CPCN statute, demonstrate net benefits to ratepayers in the state when compared with an alternative baseline scenario for 8,500 megawatts of OSW capacity, and then ensure competitive bidding by essentially protecting proprietary information in their communicate. That information is provided to either PJM or to the commission. As the commission and PJM together evaluate proposals for transmission, they have to talk about extending existing transmission grid, both onshore and offshore, that are closer to the local locations. Moving further down into the bill, okay, getting into page 15, the commission must request PJM to assist with evaluating proposals. After notice, one or more opportunities for one or more hearings to receive public comment, and an evidentiary hearing by order, a selected proposals to develop using a funding mechanism or combination described, and demonstrating net benefits to ratepayers when compared with alternative baseline scenarios. The commission may adopt conditions included in the proposal, consider conditions proposed by PPRP. The requirement to obtain the CPCN doesn't apply to these projects, these OSW projects. However, an order that selects a proposal constitutes authorization by the commission to construct and operate facilities that would otherwise require a CPCN under either 7207 or 7208 of Title VII of the Public Utilities article. There are some other essentially clarifying changes on page 16. Page 17, we're requiring DGS in consultation with the commission to issue a competitive sealed procurement solicitation as opposed simply to an invitation for bids, and then contract for up to 5 million megawatt hours annually. And then we also have additional requirements concerning the CBAs that apply, including domestic content preferences, description of plans for mitigating impacts of OSW projects on fisheries and the environment, and the extent to which the applicant will provide for financial and technical assistance for monitoring and mitigating wildlife and habitat impacts associated with the project. The state is exempt from RPS standards for the procurement of DGS if DGS procures all of the state's energy needs from this PPA, from this project. Going on to page 18, We get more into the state entering into a contract for procurement. Again, we have the labor language and labor peace agreement language in there. And this is all within the context of a later offshore transmission project. Finally, it's really the bottom of page 18, but it's the next page over in the reprint. Commission has to report to the General Assembly every year starting at the end of 2024 on offshore wind participation of small minority, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses and certified federal disadvantaged business enterprises in offshore wind projects. The General Assembly identifies that its intent is that they have at least 4 pins in the PSC to focus on implementing this act. And then finally, there's a requirement for a disparity study going forward that would support, if needed, remedial measures for discrimination against small minority women and veteran-owned businesses in the state. That's it.
Move the amendments.
Second.
All right. Delegate Adams, is this on the amendments? Discussion on the amendments?
No, move the amendments. This is a question on the bill.
Okay. All right. So I have the amendment properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. On the bill is amended.
Move
Move
favorable.
the bill. Second.
Okay. Any discussion, Delegate Adams?
Thank you. So Bob, on page, I have 2 questions. First
Yep.
one on page 15.
Okay.
When we say the commission, we're saying the Public Service Commission.
Yeah.
Shall, okay. And so the Public Service Commission shall, let's see, I-2.
Yep.
Roman numeral 2.
Mm-hmm.
Demonstrate net benefit to ratepayer in the state when compared to an alternative baseline scenario under subsection la-di-da-di. But
Yep.
just, could you please explain to me in layman's terms exactly what the commission's being asked to do there?
Well, what they're being, the whole subsection I is to evaluate the proposals and then select a particular project or projects. And what they are requiring them to review in that under E1.5, the alternative baseline scenario. Let me just see the E1.5 is they've had to solicit for proposals that demonstrate net benefits to ratepayers in the state when compared to an alternative baseline scenario under which 8,500 megawatts of offshore wind energy capacity is connected to PJM, independent of one of these directed offshore wind transmission projects. There are really 2 parts of the bill. The first is dealing with pushing forward new offshore wind turbines and generation. The second part is running a corridor of transmission facilities offshore to which several projects can connect so that you can bring that electricity onshore. And what they're saying is they're evaluating here a proposal, the proposal under this section has to be matched against an alternative proposal under which they have 8,500 megawatts of capacity landed onshore in some other transmission project.
Okay, I'm going to think about what you just said because I understood what you just said, which is a plus for me. I'm new on the subcommittee. The second question I have is on page 17 of the bill.
Yep.
Below line 25, which is a description of the extent to which an applicant will provide for financial and technical assistance to support the monitoring and mitigation of wildlife and habitat impacts associated with the project. So my 2 questions are, what do we mean in the bill when we say the project?
Okay, this is in the section dealing with, as I said, the subsequent procurement for a transmission project to serve potentially all of these offshore wind areas.
So this doesn't have anything to do with when I say the project, we're not talking about offshore wind projects. We're talking about onshore transmission projects in that setting.
Well,
Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So
Again, this is all within the context of putting transmission out there to bring to land all of, they hope, that excess offshore wind generating capacity, whether it comes on shore on our land or whether it comes on shore at Indian River.
All right. So, Mr. Chairman, just one other question that's 2B on this, which is for some reason we have taken this out as a 1-2 step. And the first step is that we talk about initial plans for mitigating the impacts of the construction and operation of the proposed offshore wind projects on fisheries and the environment. And I'm not sure I understand why those two are separate and distinct in this, because I would think you wouldn't want just a plan. We would want to understand how they're going to provide for and monitor for the mitigation of the wildlife and habitat impact. I don't think it's news to anybody on the subcommittee here that there are concerns about the fisheries, because that's been a problem all along. But some of the evidence, which may or may not be debatable, but let's just call it concerns for the the mammals, the whales, and what construction of this magnitude will look like. So in a bill like this, I would think if we're actually putting language in here that speaks in generality, that we would want to be more specific to the developers, that not only do we want a initial plan, but rather we want to figure out whether this plan will provide for financial and technical assistance for the monitoring and the mitigation of that effect on, we're talking about the marine life.
Yes.
And Bob, that was an editorial and perhaps a political point, but am I posturing my question correctly? I'm worried about the mammals. Does this amendment actually do it, or are we just talking about putting something on paper, a plan, and not really have something that's got teeth that will stick when the developers are doing work and these concerns remain?
Well, I don't think this actually limits itself to, you're talking about fisheries generally, as well as wildlife and habitat impacts. So I don't think that's limiting it to menhaden and tuna.
Well, I'm not thinking of menhaden. I'm
Whales.
thinking of whales and
No, I understand.
Whales are, so whales are not fishery. Whales are
but
marine life.
wildlife and habitat.
So I'm sure the bill sponsor is going to have something to add, but I did read the same editorial. And I think it was something like 78 whales died in 18, 19, and 20 off the Atlantic coast. And then the last 2 years, it's been 31 and 32 whales per year off the Atlantic coast.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I'm not sure how, there's no data or anything to suggest that windmills have had anything to do with whales dying, but I was pleased to see that the whale death rate has plummeted precipitously. But with that, I will go to the bill sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm going to try to thank you, Bob, for all that. And I just want to add a couple of points that I think would be helpful. Delegate Adams, I'll start with where you all left off. So this section of the bill is the Department of General Services procurement of additional wind. And this is wind that would be built in the 2 current lease areas. So it's a pretty small procurement. But that's the section. So you see this is under the up to 5 million megawatt hours that they could procure here. So just so you know, anytime there is wind being developed, there is a requirement that the federal laws require an entire plan that addresses what it is that you're talking about. The federal laws require excuse me just a second, the federal laws require the mitigation plan and all of those kinds of things. So this is just an additional piece that we added in collaboration with ocean wildlife folks to sort of double down on it essentially in the state plan, but there's a much broader plan that's also being developed and monitored by the federal government. I do also want to point out, in addition to Chair Crosby's comments, is that in the bill file itself, you have a statement from NOAA. And this addresses the fact that the whale deaths have nothing to do with anything related to offshore wind. And it outlines the range of things that affect whale death. And it outlines the various studies and so on that they've participated in and engaged in, and other solutions to that really important issue, but the fact that offshore wind has nothing to do with it. So that's in the bill file, and I can send that to you again if you're interested. The second thing I just wanted to come back to before I move off, Mr. Chair, is it okay if I check to see if that's clear for folks? Because I was going to move on back to the ratepayer cost benefit analysis, but before I do that, I want to see if it's,
I think anything,
All right.
are you referring more to whale? I think we're good on the whale.
Okay.
Yeah, no more.
On the cost benefit analysis, Bob explained the context. I wanted to add one more piece to it, which is basically we're mirroring what it is that New Jersey did. And the analysis in New Jersey is that it costs 37% less to do it this way, this coordinated state-led effort to build transmission, than it would have cost if each individual developer had found their own solution for interconnection. And so what this is saying is that it's asking PSC to work with PJM and with the people who are bidding to do this analysis to say, is this costing less to ratepayers for us to use this coordinated solution rather than each developer doing their own thing? And what we hope is that it'll look like what New Jersey found, and then we would move it forward. Of course, if it turns out that it's way more expensive to do a state coordinated effort than individual developers doing their own effort, then, we would have to think about if this is the right path forward, but that's why that piece is in there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I respond?
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, and I don't want to belabor the point, so I'll go backwards and I'll end with the whales. The reason why I'm bringing up that part of the bill that relates to the net benefit to ratepayers is not because I think you have an answer as we're sitting here in subcommittee. More importantly, I'm asking the question, what does the process look like in practice when it comes to the commission doing this work? And have we heard from the Public Service Commission? Do we know what that work product's going to look like? And then I have a more general question, which is I know that these developers are having, and it's not just a Maryland problem, it's a regional problem, finding ways to get transmission on shore. And is this bill, and perhaps this part of the bill, a way for the state to separate out and remove some of the local opposition that seems to be coming forward? That's the first question. Let me ask the second question at the same time, since Lori, it looks like you're ready to respond to it. And these are two very important points to me, and I'm happy that you're letting me do this in the subcommittee. But all I'm asking on the part related to page 17 is that if we have number one and number two, one, developing initial plans, and then two, to the extent to which an applicant will provide for financial and technical assistance, why are we not just simply saying, without just assuming that we can come to a conclusion in a subcommittee that offshore wind's not affecting whales? We've already got in the bill as amended things that talk about the fishery and the environment, the wildlife and the habitat. Why not just call out the issue as it stands, put it in the bill, and let the process play out the way that it should, not through the lens of a bill coming through what I'll call the late stage of the game. My point is I'd like to amend the amendment and include whales and be very clear that habitat and environment are things that you're already talking about. And let's just be descriptive, because I think it matters to citizens. It's in the news, it's being reported, and we can have back and forth in a political setting over the last couple of weeks. But I think citizens will derive some confidence if we're going to do this. Let's not ignore it. Let's not, That's my position. So if you want to go back to the rate part and then tell me what you think about including whales and
Delegate Adams, I mean, how would a whale amendment look? I mean, first off, I'm sure if there's whale concerns, Delegate Charkoudian's entire district will be down on the beach protesting. I'm very confident on that front.
well,
But there's no link to whale deaths and offshore wind, none. So I mean, like, it just seems like, I mean, if you want to propose an amendment in full committee, we'll happily entertain it. But I mean, I just did a quick Google. I mean, humpback whale population grown by 3%. But I mean, this is completely devolved into whales, and it's about offshore wind.
So with respect to the committee and your position on this, I'm simply saying you've already got in the bill as amended discussions for plans and then how we're going to provide financial and technical assistance for the monitoring. All I'm saying is let's not ignore the elephant in the room or the whale in the room, so to speak. And I'll leave it there because I think it's a worthy point. I certainly think that people on the shore and citizens in Maryland would know if we put this in the bill. At least the committee is thinking about it. But back to the net ratepayer benefit. I mean, I'm trying to understand, is the state trying to deal with this issue with trying to get offshore wind sited and put on land? Is that part of what this is all about? Because I know that's a problem in Maryland.
All right.
Is this a way to solve that?
I'm going to call on Delegate Charkoudian, but if you have an idea for a whale amendment, please get it over to me and work with the sponsor of the bill. But I don't know how that would even look. And we're done talking about whales.
Absolutely. Okay.
Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So coming back to your question about the transmission, you're exactly right that the biggest challenge with offshore wind and with a lot of new clean energy development is the interconnection issue. And it is a broader issue. It involves PJM. And so that has been a challenge up and down the East Coast. The best model that we've seen to solve that problem with the lowest cost and with the least ecological disruption is New Jersey's model, where New Jersey said, as a state, we're going to coordinate and figure out essentially how do we run one extension cord to the ocean and put a power strip out there that everyone can plug into, instead of having each developer all run 6 or 7 extension cords into the coast. It's a very simplified version, but that's kind of how you want to think about the difference between how it currently operates if we don't move this forward and what it would look like if we do move this forward. So you can see why that would be less costly and why it would be less ecologically disruptive. So your second question, I think, was how would that be measured? And I think, again, we're lucky that we can look to New Jersey. They've been going through this process now for over 3 years. And so they have the models for a lot of this. And I did look to New Jersey in a lot of the bill and in the amendments that we've subsequently brought forward. And I would say there is a filing that New Jersey did with FERC. I think it's November 28, 2022. And in that filing, they articulate this point about the 37% less cost to ratepayers in doing it in this way. And so I have had a chance to meet with the Public Service Commission and talk to them about it and share that information with them. And I suspect that the Public Service Commission in Maryland would work with all of their staff as well as consultants who they're authorized to work with in this bill, and they would come up with a similar sort of set of analyses. So we'd be able to do that in Maryland.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Please note both delegates Pippy and Adams. Favor.
Not unanimous, right?
Bill moves favorable out of subcommittee, and now we'll go to House Bill 1035.
Okay, presumably you want to do the same with Senate 781, conformant to what we're doing to the House bill?
Yes, correct. And then we'll just move both bills together.
Yep. Okay.
So move the amendments onto 7.
We don't just make it conform, Bob. We don't need to do that.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're good.
It's the same,
All right.
same text.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so somewhere in this mess of a desk, let me see what I can do at 1035. We have a latest amendment that actually came through just about as we were ending the bill hearing today. So it went out as 973-228/1. The amendment, did we send out the amendment or? I don't think we sent out the reprint, but what do you want?
I think everybody, I had Katie send out the reprint to everybody.
Okay, thank you. All right, so looking at the reprint, our first changes are really on bill page 3. In the definition of beneficial electrification, we're clarifying that we're talking about replacement of the direct use of fossil fuels in buildings with the use of electricity in a manner that overall reduces GHG emissions, customers' energy costs, or enables better electric grid management. There are a number of provisions here, a number of the changes here that reflect the incorporation of what we've already sent out in House Bill 169 into this bill, because 169 amended Public Utilities Section 7-211. This bill replaces 7-211 with its own part beginning at 7-220. So we've got defined department to be DHCD for that reason. On the next page, we have the definitions of low-income program and low-income residential, again, taking those from House 169. In the definition of plan, which are the things that the utilities have to, and DHCD have to come up with for to submit to the commission. It's a combination of behind the meter, front of meter, et cetera, non-energy programs that achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions through energy efficiency, conservation, demand response, and beneficial electrification as defined. And that's really more just clarifying the language that was in the bill. Task force definition is from House 169. Moving on to bill page 5, we're adding DHCD to the entities that have to submit a plan under this subtitle, under this part, to encourage and promote the efficiency and use and conservation of energy demand response and identification with goals and targets. That applies to electric companies and gas companies generally, as well as DHCD, for munis and for co-ops that serve less than 250,000 in their distribution territory, read Chop Tank. It simply requires them to include energy efficiency and conservation, demand response, and beneficial electrification programs or services as part of their service to customers, but does not require that they support particular reduction goals and targets, which are what the larger utilities and the department are subject to. About halfway down at line 22, requires the commission to adopt rate-making policies that provide, through a surcharge line item on customer bills, full cost recovery before January of 27, a reasonably incurred cost for these programs, including full recovery on a current basis, elimination by the end of 2029 on anything that was unpaid and unamortized as of the end of this year, were accrued, and reasonable performance incentives and penalties for companies as appropriate. Those are all the changes that were made by amendments. The amendments then go ahead and essentially rewrite 7.223 so that on or before January of 24, January 1 of 24, the commission has to require the gas and electric companies to implement a plan covering all ratepayer classes with a 3-year program cycle, achieving target reductions for GHG, and then reduction targets as provided in the subsection, which essentially are going to end up being for the 2024 through 2032 time period, gas emission reduction targets based on an average annual reduction of at least 1.8% of the baseline that has been determined, and then authorizing the commission, but not requiring it, to prioritize long-lived GHG reduction measures by establishing a minimum weighted average measure life for the plan of each electric company and each gas company. Contributions of GHG reduction goals and targets may include recovery of reasonable and prudent costs that aren't behind the meter program, so they cannot take credit for what's behind the meter. and it can't include an increased adoption of EV vehicles. And then beginning in January of 24, at least 80% of the GHG reductions counted towards each utility company's reduction targets have to come from behind the meter programs. In 224, it's requiring DHCD. They have a separate section on how they do things. They have to provide for low and LMI individual energy efficiency conservation programs, et cetera, in accordance with targets. For them, after 2020, for that same period, they actually have to do their baseline reductions are 0.9%. So half that for the utilities. The language following page 33, following line 33, my apologies, are again language taken from House Bill 169, as well as most of the language on Bill page 7. That's additional language concerning weatherization, DHCD's approved contractors using labor standards, and as a baseline using GHG from the direct consumption of gas and electricity for LMI households as of 2020. So using a 2020 baseline as MDE will determine, and then requiring DHCD to come up with a plan to find funding from the greatest extent possible for these programs from CEF, federal programs, and ratepayer contributions, and various other primarily federal funding sources, although there are some state sources as well. Department has to collaborate with members of the task force, which is set up under this bill, to develop their plan. MEA has to work with the department to apply for federal funding that may become available to carry all of this out. And then, let's see, further down, 7225, Commission has to issue an order that fully allocates amongst electric companies, gas companies, and the department the total amount of overall GHG reduction targets and the greenhouse gas emission reductions targets specified above. Go further onto the plan. That's pretty much the bill as drafted for most of that. Bill page 8, we're requiring that in approving, modifying, or denying a utilities plan, the commission has to consider cost effectiveness. They have added the industrial sector sub-portfolios, as well as the primary state jurisdiction specific test to determine cost effectiveness, including participant non-energy benefits, utility non-energy benefits, societal non-energy benefits, and total resource cost tests, participant non-energy benefits, and utility non-energy benefits. That's providing a lot more detail than was in the original bill concerning cost effectiveness generally, as well as in sub-portfolios. Any non-energy benefits, this is on the next page of the reprint, have to be quantifiable and directly related to a program or service. They can't just be a pie in the sky. Most of the following changes are adding, modifying, or denying to approving a plan. This is for the Department of Housing and Community Development. And further along, we're getting to the commission's monitoring the impacts of a program. We're adding back in some language concerning per capita in electricity consumption and winter summer peak demand for previous calendar years, which is from the prior law, actually, because Empower was originally started as a means to reduce peak load and overall demand. But it's also saying starting May 1st of 25, progress made toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions. 7228, adding at the bottom of page 10, a requirement that the gas and electric companies have to promote the availability of federal and state tax rebates, tax credits, incentives that can be used to support non-fossil fuel powered appliances, et cetera. Commission has to do regs to do that. It then adds a new, this is from House Bill 169, a green and healthy task force, as was included in House 169. And that's actually, other than we get down to page 11, the end of the bill, we add in some language from House Bill 169 concerning the disparity study required for some of the additional goals that the Green and Healthy Task Force must require. Again, that's taken from House 169. And those are the amendments.
Okay, so this is only the first of many amendments that I think that, well, not many, but a few that we probably want to just talk through. I know Delegate Adams and Delegate Weigel also submitted amendments, but let's take this amendment first. And we'll move this amendment, and then we can take Delegate Adams' amendment next.
Move the amendment.
Second.
Okay, the amendments have been moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, seeing none. All right. Bob, do you want to talk through, I think we could probably do, we could talk through Delegate Weigel's quickly. It does some of the similar things that Delegate Adams does. But then the other part of it is he talks about the overall cost effectiveness. And if you read the section that he puts the cost effectiveness test in there, it's actually redundant. That's why I think Delegate Adams should get, his amendment should get a little bit more time and discussion on this front.
Okay. Let me see where I have this. I apologize. I've just got
No, you're
too many
good, Bob. Take your
piles of
time.
paper.
While you're doing that, I just want to say thank you. We've had over 30 meetings on this bill alone. And I'm pretty sure I want to especially thank Matt Carpenter, who might not ever talk to me again in the amendments office, as well as Bob, who I'm pretty sure is going to lock his door and also never talk to me again. But I do want to thank everybody who was involved and provided input.
Okay. There are two amendments from Delegate Adams. The first one is a very simple one. This is 2233-225/1. And what that does on page 3 in line 9 after company. So what that is under the definition of demand response program, which is a program established by an electric company promoting changes in usage from their normal consumption patterns to changes in the price of electricity, essentially time of use, as well as other incentives designed to lower electricity use and ensure system reliability. That's something which, under the definition in the bill, is established only by an electric company. What the amendment would do would say could also be a program which is adopted by an electricity supplier. That would be a broker or a vendor or a third party.
All right, so this is the third party demand response aggregator amendment.
Yep.
I know we talked a little bit about this beforehand, Bob. Did a little bit more research. I'm okay with it, but is there any discussion on this amendment? I know Delegate Adams, I know it's yours, but just wait, hold up 1 second. I'll let you make the final comment. Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just trying to figure out where do we have the amendment? I don't think I do. I'm okay with the concept of it. Before we voted on it, I was hoping to see exactly where it goes in the bill and what the specific language is.
Okay, if you look on bill page 3 of the reprint,
Uh-huh.
and it's in line 9, you have the phrase an electric company.
Yep.
And so it would say, comma, an electricity supplier, comma, or a third party.
So it expands what.
So essentially, and this is, I've had more time to think about it since talking earlier with Delegate Crosby. This is simply saying that the DR program that can be supported could be one, not only the electric company's own program, but also one from one of the other providers of electricity under competitive supply or a third party. All it says is essentially is making sure they can get credit for the program. There's still going to be components of either the electric or gas companies or the DHCD's actual plans.
Yep. Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm fine with that.
You good? All right. I think this one carries a little bit more weight than the whale one, Chris.
Yes.
Good to you.
Mhm.
All right. Does anybody have any heartache on this? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Seeing none opposed.
Okay, Delegate Adams, other amendment. This is 413424/1.
Number one.
Goes. Essentially, what this does is it says if you have, and I'd have to figure out how this works with the other amendments, but in the section here of that, come on, you. Go to page 7. So, where in section 7.224, this is actually where the department is procuring, submitting plans and procurement of electricity, that okay, it's essentially saying, and I think you really are meaning, instead of DHCD, Delegate Adams, I think you mean here the electric companies and gas companies, which ends up being a little restructured from what we have now with the adopted amendments. You'd want to say that if they haven't before submitted a plan, so they're new to this program, rather than having everything in place by July 1 of 23, you're giving them an additional 3 months to come up with a plan for achieving electricity savings and demand reduction targets. And they have to comply with consulting requirements. And then they have to get back on the 3-year cycle for every July 1st. Is that correct?
Right. So
essentially, it's giving an extra 3 months for those that aren't currently in the system to get in sync.
That's correct. First time appliers, and it extends by 3 months the consultation period and 3 months the filing period. So, yep.
So is that a total of 6 months or 3 months?
3 months.
3
months.
They're asking for a 3-month extension. Delegate Adams, just real quick, what was the purpose or the reasoning that he asked for, or they asked for the additional 3 months? Can they not meet the timeline right now?
So the gas companies, and Bob can correct me if I got this wrong, but the gas companies have not heretofore had to involve themselves in this. And I think this bill brings them in. And their concern is a timeline concern, not a compliance concern. So what we're doing is granting them this first time application status and granting them some additional time to get their plan together. So it's all about timing. It's not about whether or not they want to be participants of this. That's going to be an obligation once the bill passes.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah,
So,
Empower was an electric program.
yep, I got you. So I'll do something a little unusual. I see Molly Knoll from the PSC. I don't see anybody else from the PSC, but Molly, can you jump in? Does the PSC have any heartburn with this?
No, the PSC has no heartburn with that additional time for the first-time filers.
All right, thank you. Do any of the members have any concerns with granting them? All right, seeing none. On the amendment, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
Okay.
Anybody opposed?
Just,
Bob?
Yeah, I was
Go
going
ahead,
to say, it's going to take me a little while
Yep.
to find the right places for these as the other amendment restructured the bill somewhat. But I will make sure to share that with you and with Delegate Adams to make sure that we got it right
Okay. Yep.
before it goes
Perfect.
before it goes to full committee.
All right, I got you. So, I mean, Chris, you're 2 for 2. You want to just throw something else up there, see if you got a shot?
I'm actually pretty happy. I might actually vote for this bill.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have attached all 3 amendments. Bob, I want to talk in concept about an additional amendment that I had the conversations with the Senate today on.
Okay.
So we'll probably we'll vote the bill out. We'll probably vote on this amendment just so everybody knows how this is going to technically work or procedurally work. We will vote the bill with the amendments out, and then it'll probably wait a day. And then we'll vote on this probably on Thursday in committee. But so there's a lot that goes on. First off, let me just start by saying this. A lot went into the bill, like I've already mentioned. It's not as big a bill, I think, as people are making it out to be, but there are a lot of issues that surround the Empower program that are somehow getting conflated or thrown into this mix. Right now, there is about an $850 million outstanding balance for Empower. It's amortized. And the PSC issued an order in December, and essentially they said that two things. One, everything that is accrued in the year for the Empower program has to be expensed, and then the amortized balance has to be paid off by December 31st, 2029. To be clear, this bill to start had nothing to do with this, and it wouldn't change anything in it. But we realize that that is going to be a little bit of a shock to ratepayers when they see a jump in their Empower line surcharge, which we've kept it as a surcharge and we don't allow it to be rate-based or any rate of return on top of it, because the utilities, and frankly, they weren't bad actors here, no fault of their own, ended up having this balance. And so what we've agreed to with the Senate is to allow them to extend the time to pay it off to 2031. There is some back and forth right now with the Office of the Attorney General that if we grant the extension, that we would not allow the utilities to collect interest off of that money. I'm not sure that we can do that, but whether we can or cannot do it, if we can remove the interest, then that provision will move forward. If for whatever reason you can't remove the interest and the interest must stay on, it doesn't matter. We're still going to give them the 2-year extension. So in concept, what the amendment would do is essentially grant the utilities an additional 2 years to pay off, so December 31st, 2031, to pay off the amortized balance. And then if we get the ruling from the Office of Attorney General that says we can strip the interest off or that utilities cannot collect interest, we will put that on in full committee. So that will not be part of the amendment right now. So with that, I will open that up in concept to the members. Delegate Charcuti. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Okay, so just for technical purposes, what we're doing is we're taking the line in the adopted amendment that says on or before December 31, 2029, the elimination of, and changing that to be 2031. Is that correct?
Correct. That's it.
Without the addition of any other language that may still be negotiable concerning.
That'll only come
interest.
down. I'm sure everybody's going to go crazy and everybody's going to get 9 million phone calls, but the call's already into the OAG, and that is where we will, they're going to have the final say. And if they can do this, I mean, we've already negotiated and already talked to the Senate about this.
Yeah, if the will of the body is to include that, I would just include that in the next round of amendments.
Yep, I got you. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your work on that. And I think it's really important, and I would fully support that amendment. And I just want to add, for the folks who are not familiar with what the cost of carrying an $800 million balance is, about $56 million a year for ratepayers. So that means that the utilities are earning the 7% working cost of capital. $56 million a year is what ratepayers are paying every year for this $800 million carried balance. And the utilities have chosen not to have that paid down over this time period that they've been carrying it. It's been at least 6 years, probably longer, close to a decade. And so I think that it is really important to get it paid down, to make sure that this is expensed, which was the bill currently does. But I just think it's really important for everyone to understand that in that time period, had it just been paid down, we would have paid close to the same amount. ratepayers are literally paying more in interest than, if I can just jump on this soapbox for a second, twice as much in interest than low-income ratepayers are receiving in benefits from this program, which we also start to address here. So I just want like the magnitude of what this means in terms of the cost of this interest to ratepayers is really significant. And so I think if we are able to do this with working with the Attorney General, I just 100% behind it. And thank you for your work on that.
Yeah. The only thing I would just say, and you're right, it's about 60 million. It's quite a chunk of money. You know, I'm just cautious. Like you're right. The utilities have carried this, I think, since 2016, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not going to vilify them for it. I think that they were allowed to do it year one, and then the PSC put an end to it. And it wasn't anything that I think that they did maliciously. But you are right; they've earned quite a good rate of return off of it on the back of ratepayers. And what we are concerned about now, as we correct it going forward, is the overall cost to ratepayers, which, by the way, like, just so everybody is aware, all of this conversation is outside of this bill. This bill does not change any of that. So this is just another issue that we are trying to solve now and placing it in this bill to make it an easier impact or a little bit lighter for the ratepayer. So with that, is there any other conversation surrounding this amendment in concept?
No.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. David Fraser Hidalgo's in. All right. Anybody opposed? All
Are we
right.
on
Bob,
the bill
can
now, or
I-
are we on the amendment still?
Sorry, say again.
Are we on the bill or are we on the amendment still?
We're on the amendment. We're just on the last amendment to extend the timeline and potentially remove, well, just to extend the timeline at the moment.
By 2 years.
Yep, by 2 years. Okay. All right. So all 4 amendments now have been adopted. So on the bill as amended.
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
All right, the bill's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Delegate Shi?
First of all, I just want to thank you and all the members and the staff involved in your great hard work. When I first introduced my version of the Empower Energy Savings Bill, I didn't expect it to be this behemoth of a bill, but I'm glad to hear and to see how you integrated the components, what we're trying to do and what the state is trying to do to move us forward, not only in energy savings, but also in working with PSC and utilities in terms of GHG reduction and helping low-income Marylanders. So I'm pleased with what we have done together. Some of the amendments I'm still honestly trying to comprehend because I just got the reprint today, but they sound like we are moving in the right direction. So I just want to give kudos to you and very much appreciate it.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the work you did as well. And I know that I can't even remember the number right now, but 934 or 904.
Yes, 904. I did have a
904.
question though, because in the first iteration of the reprint I got, it looks like my original provision of establishing within BHCD this navigation, multilingual navigation program and outreach program, looks like it's being struck in the final version. I still believe strongly that people need help navigating these programs. So I don't know if I read it wrong, but I believe that's the case.
All right, Delegate Shi, after this, I will come over to your office and we can talk about that. Happy to talk through that amendment. We can always offer it in full committee. Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to applaud you and the committee for working on this bill. I know this is one of the ones I got a lot of calls from in meetings from those that were concerned. And it seems like the subcommittee worked in earnest to develop this product. I'm going to vote for the bill coming out of subcommittee. And I'm going to do so because I think that this is as thoughtful a process as I've been, part of on any of these subcommittees on a subject like this. And I want to thank the group for working through it.
All right. I appreciate everybody and all the hard work that went into it. On that, on the bill as amended, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Anyone opposed? Tippy.
Close.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. And with that, that concludes this subcommittee. The only thing I would say for everybody, because the bills are a little bit more substantial, we do have a voting session tomorrow. We're gonna have one on Thursday. We'll probably have one on Friday. I would expect both bills today to move together on Thursday's voting list, if I had to guess. So I'm sure Delegate Charkoudian really wanted us to vote on her bill right after this in full committee, but she'll have to wait 2 days. So I appreciate everybody, and I'll see everyone tomorrow.